Hello, Africa, and of course, welcome to Report Desk Africa on New Central Television. And it's always a pleasure to have you join us here. This is where we talk about the latest and, of course, the most trendy story, news story, or whatever you might call it, across the continent throughout the week. While some people might say I look like Bernard, it's obvious right now I am not Bernard. And of course, my co host can, of course, attest to that fact. I am Ni Omni. And of course, I won't do this alone.
Well, all that matters is that I have a co-host. My name is Blessings Masugu, and just like you rightly said, welcome to Report Desk Africa. This is a show where we give you all the updates on what's happening on the African continent, and we also give you the reports that we have packaged together during the course of the week. We check out the present happenings, compare it to past events, and also future expectations. Now, before we go further, let's take you through a quick forecast, the forecast we had last week, and also see how we have been tracking it here in News Central. Now, we told you about the plans by the Tunisian president to dissolve municipal councils months before local elections.
We also told you that Ghana is taking delivery of the measles vaccine to make up for shortages being recorded in all 16 regions. And finally, we told you that Cyclone Freddy, the name has raised a lot of concern. Why name it Freddy? Will make landfall again in Mozambique later this week after it struck Madagascar last week.
Well, that being said, we will be going to the West African country, Nigeria. There's a lot going on in Africa's most populous country, and we will shed light on the happenings in the political and, of course, economic environment. Now, the country has just rounded up its election year with the governorship and state house of assembly elections. Now, some people will argue that it's far from over. Now, they have been generating reactions from local and international community as well. Also, Nigerians are still bearing the brunt of the cash scarcity, despite the call by the central bank to allow banks to disburse both old naira notes till the end of the year. Now, these are our focus on the show today. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
And of course, we head to West Africa, Nigeria, precisely. And if you will recall, Nigeria held its presidential election just a few weeks ago. That was on the 25th of February. And of course, just concluded its governorship election across 28 states of the Federation. And now Nigerians in 28 states of the Federation went out to vote in the governorship and state house of assembly last Saturday, March 18th. After the highly anticipated protest, majority of the states saw the return of many incumbent governors, while in some others, outgoing governors lost their bids to install a successor. The state assembly polls also saw Nigerians elect their next local representatives. Elections have come and gone, but they have left great issues behind, including an increasingly dividing populace and many others.
Well, it's no longer news that independent groups have faulted the process, urging the INEC to investigate the violations of the Electoral Act. And they've also gone as far as taking it to the Supreme Court, as well as the guidelines by its staff and its citizens, and to ensure that justice and transparency are meted out. News Central's Adeshawa Odushoga reports.
Nigerians again trooped out in their numbers to participate in the March 18th governorship and House of Assembly elections, despite the displeasures recorded in the last presidential polls. The election, which recorded a lower voter turnout, witnessed voter intimidation and privacy violation by political thugs, vote buying, violence, and misconduct of duty bearers. Speaking with journalists and some election observers on the post-election report, a group known as Justice Development and Peace Center have alleged that the just concluded elections were not free, fair, or credible.
An election is credible when it is free, meaning that everybody who is eligible to vote and be voted for is able to do so without hindrance. From observation, the governorship and states of assembly election held on Saturday, March 18, 2023, does not seem to have met these conditions.
Some of the challenges of the elections highlighted include that voting privacy was deliberately violated by thugs and party supporters across several parts of Lagos. The group also reported incidents of vote buying and ballot snatching, across major states where voting took place.
This time around, we observed instances where voter privacy was deliberately violated by thugs and party supporters who, in the full view of INEC officials and the police, were watching as people cast their votes in order to confirm that they voted for the ruling party in the state.
Beavers' machines were snatched by political thugs. There were also instances of ballot box snatching in Benue, Delta, Lagos, Niger, Ogun, and Rivers states.
The group, however, urged the Independent National Electoral Commission to be accountable in the post-election processes and investigate electoral violations by its state and non-state actors.
The Commission must be willing and seen to have concrete steps to investigate cases of gross violation of electoral acts and guidelines and the Constitution, whether by its staff, political actors, security personnel, or citizens, and ensure that offenders are brought to book.
While Nigeria rounds up the 2023 election cycle, the point of note from the polls were that the ruling party again retained the office of the president. The two biggest political parties won the majority of states in the governorship polls, and a third force was introduced into the fray with a significant performance along with increased youth participation in the political process. Adeshawa Odushoga, reporting for News Central.
Well, that was our correspondent Adeshawa Odushoga, who gave us a comprehensive breakdown of how the governorship elections went. Now, joining us in this conversation is News Central's correspondent, Dapo Adigboye. Thank you so much, Dapo, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, guys. I mean, it's always a pleasure being on the show, every time like this. And it's always also important to talk about pivotal issues across Africa.
We have
you guys look good, by the way.
Oh, you do look good. I think we're all suited up.
Right.
But anyways, for the conversation of the day now, Dapo and Ni, of course, the much anticipated Nigerian elections have come and have gone, or some would say that it's not over. But Ni, you were on the field to cover the southwestern states in Nigeria, or what would you say is your general assessment of the process? Let's use Oyo State now as a case study. What was your general assessment?
Sweet, in one word. And we could tell that it was even good because when you listen to the last report that I just aired, you will notice that Oyo is not part of the states that was mentioned even by the observers which experienced violence. Oyo has about 33 local governments, and of all those local governments, we only had 2 polling units where there were cases of violence. And that goes to tell you that it's a peaceful place. And I would say it was as a result of many of them knew who they wanted to vote for. And of course, they knew what they wanted. So it was almost like there was no much competition, basically, because people had their mindset at a particular place, and that's what they did. And you can see both the aged, the young, the old, male, female come out. I won't say en masse because we also recorded low turnouts during the election. In fact, across the 33 local governments, there was no local government that had at least up to half of the people, the registered voters come out to actually vote on that particular day, and that is pretty low. So generally, it was peaceful at my end, although I can't speak for so many other states where we had pockets of violence, some not pockets, a handful, and Ghana must go, as they will refer to it, of violence in some of those places. So, but for Oyo, generally, it was peaceful, it was okay. In fact, Oyo was the very first state that was declared by INEC. Yeah, Oyo was the very first state that was declared by INEC. And of course, that goes to say that things went well there. I think the 18 states were declared straight up, then they took a break, then they did the remaining 15. And of course, the last one was the declaration and the computing of the data. And that was it. Although the little force they had there was the Labour Party candidate, who of course was talking down on INEC for not declaring the results earlier. And we would remember that Labour Party in that particular state had already thrown their weight behind the People's Democratic Party candidate, who is Seyi Makinde. And of course, I'm not sure he was so happy with that because he kept saying he wouldn't step down. But of course, it reflected in the votes and people voted for who they wanted.
Well, okay, so Dapo, you were on the ballot Nigeria on those 2 days, and I would like to know your own assessment. Now, Ni has spoken for Oyo State because he was there to cover it, but you saw at least a few other states. What would you say that the process was like in those other places?
Well, the Nigeria's Guba and also State House polls, well, I would say to a very large extent, was okay. Let's so that it doesn't look like one is talking out of the blues, right? We saw pockets compared to what we anticipated or what we expected. What we saw vastly in quite a number of states, even though the likes of Oyo was peaceful, and some other states like that, but we saw pockets of intimidation and also violence in some other states, particularly key states. So, for instance, states like Lagos State, for instance, we saw some areas that you could just see obvious intimidation. I mean, as early as, I think, 10 a.m., videos started coming up of places in Lagos where certain people are told not to come out to vote if they were not ready to support a certain candidate or a certain party. Some were profiled based on tribe. We saw the old tribal bigotry that happened in a place like Lagos, right? And also we saw violence break out in some areas too. Some people even said, I had first-hand report where someone even said that in this particular area, an artisan who they patronize so well, they know him in the area. Like everybody uses him. He was the one telling the party faithfuls that were sort of intimidating the voters in that area, identifying people of a certain tribe for them. And then the following day, he went around begging. I mean, at some point, one would have thought that probably Nigeria's political process had moved beyond the process of, or the act of intimidation, the act of violence, the act of division, the act of tribal profiling. But we saw all of that play out in excess, during this election. And it was really sad because, as just a neutral observer, like we are, it's not like one is talking out of place. There are evidence to back all of this. There are videos out there. So, I mean, if you look at all of this and you rate it when it comes to free and fair election, I think you can use your own tongue to count your teeth and know whether indeed, in some areas, it was really, really free and fair. Now, in places like Rivers State, for instance, we also saw violence breakouts in some places there too. There are videos to back this up.
But
so I just feel that...
Sorry to just butt in. Is this not supposed to just raise concerns? Because for the presidential election, we saw some of those things. We saw that it was followed by voter dissatisfaction, especially in the electoral body, INEC, the governorship election. Also, as we are seeing now, I was marked by, although much more voter apathy, but let's focus on voter oppression first and violence, amongst others. How did we even get to this point? Because I remember after the presidential election, there were a lot of meetings with stakeholders, with the police. Even in Lagos, we had stakeholders, legal representative meet with police operatives saying that, oh, it's going to be better. Okay, let's categorize this. Let's pick INEC, let's pick the security, and of course, let's pick the electorate. Blessed, INEC, did they improve during this gubernatorial election, from your own view?
Truth is, I don't think, in the views of others, I'm supposed not to take sides, but the truth is, in other people's views and from the conversations I've had in a long time, they didn't exactly perform up to par, especially considering how much the budget was for this election. Are
we talking about the presidential or the gubernatorial now?
Well, I would say that the gubernatorial was just a continuation of what happened for the presidential election. There was nothing different.
No pass mark at all.
If I was to even mark it, I think I'll just take out maybe 10 points. Take out 10 points.
Dapo, what was your take on this? We're just talking about INEC for now.
Now, since we're talking about INEC for now. Now, the thing is this. Look, I think it's a situation of what we ordered versus what we got eventually, right? As they say on social media. Nigerians thought that, we had a bit of issues during the presidential election. In some areas, voting started late because officials didn't get there on time. Frankly speaking, in the Guba polls, there was a bit of improvement because at least I know that when I was leaving pretty much early in the morning for the studio, I saw that voters had already, the officials had already started, arriving in certain places and were already setting up shop. Also, if we look at the presidential too, part of the fallout had to do with transmission of results.
Yeah, the IRF issue.
The IRF issue. I think it also persisted again.
But
During the global polls,
would you say as much? Okay, wait, let's agree on this first. So we have a pass mark.
Some of those issues that we faced, Nigerians faced during the presidential elections were tackled. Let's not even go to whether it was the aspect of security, which we can say, okay, probably is the work of the police and all of that. Technical issues. There are videos that in some polling units in Lagos, for instance, the official there was telling them that if you people are waiting for transmission of results, it's not going to happen.
Yes, yes. And now you see
it's
why.
It's not going to happen.
And now
right now we are beginning to see court injunction saying that INEC has the prerogative to transfer results, whether it's manually or electronically. But guess what? It's the same agency that told Nigerians that, look, it's going to be seamless. You know, we've learned our mistakes even in the presidential elections this time around.
And it was even postponed to help them prepare better.
If we're to talk about this in terms of percentage, now you're just talking about one polling unit out of one local government in one particular state. No,
if we have to talk about it on the aspect of transmission of results, I think to a very large extent.
Yes.
A lot of polling units could not do that electronically. They had issues. There was even a report of one where people had to try different Wi-Fi options. People had to turn on the hotspot on their phones. You know, in spite of all of that, they couldn't still electronically transmit the results. So when you look at all of this, and we are talking about building voter confidence here. We see a lot of voter apathy now in this gubernatorial election. People really didn't come out. Where you have over 400,000 people registered, less than 50 showed up in certain units. And that's because people saw the fallout in the presidential, and then in the morning of the Guba polls, you know, they just felt, I mean, it might just be a waste of time. I think the bottom line is this, right? We are talking, Nigeria has gotten to a point whereby I think moving forward, it's a situation of how do we improve? How do we get it right? How do we ensure we are not moving in circles, right? And I think the foundation has to be how we elect our leaders. How do we ensure that that process is seamless, number one, it's credible, it's free, and it's fair? Look, no one is talking out of emotions. The facts are there to see. There are videos out there, right?
I would just like to bring to your attention.
So at the end of the day, these are real questions we really need to ask ourselves, and genuinely, in the interest and the health of our democracy, seek solutions to.
Dapo, you know that this IRF issue also was what some electorate said helped Abia State, for Labour Party to still retain Abia State, because most of the uploads that were done already was what helped and didn't make other opposition party be able to tamper with those evidence. So I wouldn't want us to speak largely, because if we're going to rate INEC's improvement from the presidential to the gubernatorial, we need to speak across board.
But yeah, you're not just basing it off of the few states that you know. Because I feel like the buzz was not so much like the presidential. That's why we don't know that there were so many places that
that's more than an average.
It wasn't uploaded. I think that because the buzz was not as much, we don't know that a lot of places were not. There were certain places that, I mean, some videos that made the rounds on social media where people were saying before the start of the voting process that we are not uploading. They said it, I mean, straightforward.
Yeah, I got even some in Lagos too.
So a lot of places like that, yeah. So I think just because the buzz was not as much.
The issue is this. In terms of maybe starting on time in many areas compared to the presidential elections, you would want to say, okay, well, to a large extent, thumbs up to INEC. But in terms of the technical issues they still need to get particularly when it comes to uploading these results electronically. Yes, we know that the Electoral Act, gives them the liberty to do it either manually or electronically. But what they promised, or what INEC gave as a thumbs up to Nigerians, is that, look, this process is going to be seamless. Uploading will be done almost in real time. And that's what really people wanted. We didn't see that really happen in many of the polling units. And I think right now, INEC really needs to do a lot to redeem its image, as an unbiased and efficient umpire moving forward when it comes to elections in Nigeria. Okay. That's why we see a lot of people at the end of every election, or many elections, they go to tribunal, they go to court. If the process was pretty much seamless, right? You won't have a lot of
No,
petitions.
but you know, competitions.
No, I understand. See, you know, there are certain situations that you cannot dispute.
Yeah.
Frankly speaking.
But it doesn't mean you're not still going to
right?
try.
No, of course, as an individual, this is democracy. You have a right to challenge results. But
So, gentlemen,
in Oyo State, for instance, let me give you it, like you said, in Oyo State, it was, from your analysis, from your report, you said it was almost like the blind could see that, look, the power is going to the incumbent, because it was clearly the choice of the people. And to a large extent, the process there was what? Very seamless and peaceful, right? So I just feel that INEC really needs to do a lot when it comes to building voter confidence. We saw a lot of voter apathy in the Guba polls, and that is bad, particularly for the future of this country. I had statements like, someone even said it on camera that Mona pick the person Mona won't pick. After a lady said, we are not uploading your results.
So when we're talking about this voter apathy, you know, okay, fine, we've tackled INEC now. Let's just take the aspect of security, because security can also impact voter apathy. When we're talking about voter apathy now, first, let me ask this question. Is it the duty of the police or INEC to protect electorate at polling units?
Okay, now the thing is this. It's actually, for every polling unit, you should have at least a stationed officer. Before now, they used to hold arms and ammunition, right? But I guess there was some sort of outcry that some people cannot come out to vote when they see the guns, you know, around the polling unit. So there was an act that, you know what, soldiers at the polling units shouldn't carry guns. However, what they can just do, should issues beyond their control escalate, they would call for backup. So the question right now is, how soon, I don't know if you get what I mean, will that backup, you know, show up? We saw a lot of that happen. I mean, when the violence, you know, occurred in some of the polling units, some people said the officers there just looked on, which is actually wrong. But again, you would also want to say, did that officer also try to call for backup?
Okay,
and
so
did the backup really? So I think to a very large extent, when it comes to security of voters, as much as INEC might have done its preparation, you would also want to hold the IG, you would want to hold the commissioner of the state responsible for that aspect. Because prior to the elections too, we usually get statements, you know, press releases from the office of the IG.
Blessing, you have something to say.
Because
I'm certainly in the view of this particular.
In all honesty, right, I don't think that, especially in this part of Africa, I don't think that the security from the body, that's INEC, is enough. I don't think that will suffice, because we've already seen from past elections how the elections go here. It's not always a black and white situation. We've seen that there are always hoodlums. There are always people who come fearlessly and very courageously to take the ballot boxes. There are people who come to disrupt elections. So I don't think that, you know, some volunteers from the INEC would just do to secure the area. So then I think that is where the police and the IGP and all of that comes in, because to be honest, this is a general election. This is something that you will have thousands of people, hundreds of people in a certain place, and you know the history of a country, you know how elections are run here. So I don't think that INEC security will suffice in that situation.
Well, let me give them a thumbs up. They actually did respond, you know. In some areas that we had skirmishes, we saw the influx of policemen, and even the soldiers, you know, came to the rescue in certain polling units when issues, you know, escalated beyond control. They were prompt to respond, and there were even reports that, you know, a ballot snatcher was actually shot in the process. But again, if you look at the percentage compared to the incidents or the incidents of violence that happened across the nation in certain areas, you'll want to compare that percentage to the areas where they responded promptly. I mean, you can almost tell that a lot still needs to be done when it comes to improving security during
absolutely.
elections.
Okay, so while we try to wrap up that and move to this very, very important part of this conversation, I just want to add one or two things to that. We understand that security can impact voter turnout, but I'm also of the opinion that maybe because people didn't get their choice, that also impacted on these governorship election. But this is the part I want us to also discuss. 28 states actually went to the polls. 28 states went to the polls today, on 18th rather. And of those 28, APC had 15 states, PDP had 9 states, NNPP had 1, which Kano, and of course, Labour Party had 1. As against the third force saga that was coming up during the presidential election, we are looking at the third force right now almost being at the rear.
I think where people, or where a lot of us seem to get it wrong, is that people thought that, or many people are of the opinion that because a third force arose, we would see that cascade from the presidential to the gubernatorial polls.
Yes.
But you are forgetting something. Nigerians also are not stupid. In certain states, they know where they have a governor they are comfortable with, and they are aware of the governor they know they are not comfortable with.
That's the word I'm looking for.
Right? So I think it's just out of place to give it a blanket, approach to say, okay, well, because a third force arose, then we should, experience that sort of cascading effect. The fire should burn, across states. No, in the presidential elections, people knew what they wanted.
Right.
Hence, the third force arose. But at the state level, that's government closer to the people. People also identified who they wanted. You take a state like Abia State, for instance, right? The only state that the Labour Party won. According to reports, Abia State has been ruled by the same party since 1999.
Right.
And this last governor from Feelers, you could tell that probably they were not comfortable with him, right? There are cases where on national TV, say part of the development projects introduced in the state is when he brought a certain luxury shopping mall into the state, and at some point he even said he gives 500 naira to pregnant women. Those were, and I guess the people had had enough, and so they just wanted a change, right?
Okay.
And hence we saw what happened in Abia State. It went to Labour Party.
That was really far.
All right.
My point is this: in Oyo State, they didn't say they were tired of the incumbent, right? Even though it's from the two major parties, they knew who they went for. The same thing to happen in quite a number of states. So I think it's a misconception to feel that, I even think that the Labour Party was more of an obedient or Peter Obi.
All right, Dapo, apologies, but because of our time, we can't go on. But thank you. You have passed your message. And I think in summary, what he's just trying to say is that people know what they want.
Yeah,
and when they see what they want, then they stick to it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Dapo.